Welcome everybody to our Arbiter Sports webinar for you. We're going to be learning a little bit about Arbiter's game. Appreciate you guys being here. My name is David Martin. I am actually the onboarding supervisor here at Arbiter Sports. I'm excited to get to know you guys. I'm excited to learn a little bit about our Arbiter game and share with some of the knowledge that we have. Just so you know, we'll have kind of our onboarding maybe every other month or every month, depending on the service, stuff like that. And so today we're going to be working with our Arbiter game onboarding, which just generally means we're going to be talking about a very minimal things today. It's not going to be too in-depth. We do have Kaylee, our representative here, that's going to help answer questions. So if you have a question box over to the right-hand side, you can drag that over and you make sure that you ask that question, and Kaylee will be here to help answer those questions. Now, if it's something that is something that's part of the webinar, you know, I'll try to pull that in, so Kaylee will let me know so we can talk through it. If it's something that's maybe not something specifically to what we're talking about, we will have time at the end to do that. So we're really excited for you guys to be here, and if you have questions. Now, what we're going to be focusing on is basically getting started. We have a new website you can go to. It's at arbitersports.force.com/schools. Kayla will put that in the chat, so you'll be able to do that, so you can pull that information up. And this is kind of our new article site that you'll be able to go to. That will be constantly updated with any new features, as well as for those people that are just getting started. We're going to be focusing over here in the Get Starting box. We're going to be probably starting here in step 1, and we're going to see how many steps we can get through, whether we're going to get through all step 6. We'll see here. So we're going to start to get that going and get you taken care of here. Once again, if you can't hear me, you can't see anything, please let us know, and I'll be more than happy to adjust anything. So first of all, let's kind of start out with Arbiter Sports. So all of us should have been logged in. We're into our Arbiter game, and I'll give you a few minutes just to make sure we get you signed in there real quick. Okay, so everybody's signed in. Thank you so much for doing that. So now, when we first sign into Arbiter game, generally it's going to take us to our schedule page. So as you see here, step 1, we're going to talk a little bit about school settings. So that's going to be over in our settings section here. So let's go right ahead and we're going to pull that information up here real quick. Here we go. Okay, good. Okay. So we've got that pulled up here. We're going to see about getting you taken care of and get you going here. Perfect. Thank you. Awesome. So in our school settings, we have a couple of things that we can do. We have where we can put our phone number. We see where we can actually tell what is our mascot, as well as we can add a logo. You can also do a primary color here, which will help you with your Arbiter Live setup for you. And I'll show you a little bit of, so at Arbiter Sports, or arbiterlive.com, sorry. This is where anybody could go to actually search for your school. So today, we're looking at Alta High School. So we can type that in. They can search for your school. They see your school here. They click on it, and you can see where they can get information about what's happening, you know, and the different practices as well as games. And that's kind of what it looks like over here is kind of how it's controlled over here. So some of this information, so you see here's their logo. That's coming from kind of this location here, as well as the primary colors, different things like that. So that's kind of the settings of the school. Not a requirement to set that up. Generally, when your account is first set up, you're probably going to have this general information filled out. But this miscellaneous is kind of a cool thing that you can do. Second thing you can do that we'll talk about in our settings section is actually underneath our staff area. So you see we have a lot of staff in this test out to high school game. Now, anybody in this staff basically has access to everything in Arbiter game. So you do have to kind of be careful with who you put in there because they can, change games. They could change fee amounts. They could do payments. There's not a way currently in Arbiter game to limit, let's say, the transportation administrator to not be able to change games other than hopefully a bit of trust that you have with transportation. So that's kind of the one thing that I encourage you guys, especially starting in 2018, look at that list there in staff and just make sure that you have the people you want in there. Obviously, to remove people, there's a little trash icon over to the right-hand side. You can see that David Martin here, this one, he is the head administrator. So you can't remove him until you add another athletic director. Then that athletic director would have to go in and then they could remove David out of there. But at this current time, because I'm signed in as them and as the head guy, you can't remove me. Thank goodness. So that's kind of our settings here in school and staff. So let's kind of dive a little bit further into our next getting started, which is first of all, our adding teams. So in our adding teams section, there's actually a teams box here that allows you to go ahead and actually click teams. You can see all the different teams you have. If you need to edit a team, you just click on really anything over here, or you can click on the name. That's going to give you an access to actually information on the team. We'll talk a little bit about this in detail as we create the team, but this is a place where you could delete the team as well. So let's add a team and talk about some of those requirements and some of those things in there. So if we create a team, the first thing that the team wants to know is what type of sport. Now, there's some great sports. We've basically tried to add in everything we possibly can when it comes to sport. So there's a lot of different things in here. Netball. There's even an other button if you have any questions, or maybe your sport isn't in here, but we have quite a bit in here for you. So let's say we're going to add a team for figure skating for the fun, since it's a cold weather outside. We can choose gender. So there's this, a boys, is it a co-ed or just girls? So in this case, we're going to do girls figure skating, and then we can choose the type of level they're in. So are they in Division I, junior college? Are we in varsity, 5th grade? We're going to put them as a varsity girls. Then we kind of go down here and we kind of start to say, okay, well, where are they at? Now these sites are dictated by this section up here that says sites. And we'll talk a little bit about how we add those. But when we go in here and we could say that, we at our school maybe actually have, a rink. So I could click out to high school and I could say that they're in the auxiliary gym. That's where our skating rink is. By doing this on this section here, it's going to allow it to make it really easy when we create games, because the system will automatically recognize that if it's a home team, that they're going to be playing at home in the auxiliary gym. So you don't have to do that in the future. You can come down here and you can say that there's no officials required, assigned by the school, or if you work with an assigning group, you can choose an Arbiter 1 assigning group. You'd click the Add Plus button here, and then you'd go right ahead and you would actually have to type in the group number. And I don't know if our group has figure skating here in this group, but let's see if we add this group in. I hit Tab. We see that group here is the Real Pac-Man, but you see that on their site, they don't have figure skating. So that's obviously the wrong one for that. But that's a way you could go right ahead. You would have your assigning group number, usually about 6 digits long, and your assigner should have that group in there. For our case, because it's figure skating, we're going to assign them, and we'll show you how to add officials a little bit later. And there's going to need to be 4 judges, we'll say, to be there to be judging the figure skating. We can look at over here to the right-hand side, our setup times. So you can see that, when do we need to have the ice start, freezing? We'll say 5 o'clock in the morning. Facilities needs to get in there and start getting the rink set up for us. Now this dismissal time is basically when we're going to let the students out of their classrooms. So at home, it may not be anything, it may be just not applicable, but if they're going to an away game, maybe it's a far away game or whatever, you could say, instead of getting out at normal time at 2:45, we're gonna let them out at 2 o'clock. When do our normal game starts? Now, this game start can be adjusted when you're in the actual setup of the game, but this is kind of a way that you can kind of say, okay, normally we set we start, let's say, at 3:45 every day. We can also say a normal figure skating, let's say, goes on for 2 hours, and then it'll say, okay, after 2 hours, when do we need to clean up? And we could say, okay, cleanup time is at 8 o'clock. So we're somewhat done with getting our team set up here. The last thing that we can do is kind of add workers to this. This is a way, if we've had workers before, you can go right ahead and we can click on the Add New button. And we could say that we need, let's say, an announcer. And we can choose who we'd like to have to be our announcer. We're going to choose Juan Solo to be our announcer. Yes, we like Star Wars over here. We could say we pay him $10. So there we are. We get him taken care of. Let's see if we can add somebody else, because it looks like that one's not going through here. Well, needless to say, once that got in, you would actually see the workers down here. The reason why we want to do that, once again, is it's going to allow us to basically make sure that we get it all taken care of for us, and that we make sure that our assigners, we have workers for those games. That's over here in the workers tab, and we'll come back to that if we need to. We'll go down here to create team, and now we can go down to our figure skating. Here we go. Here's our girls varsity figure skating. You can see that they don't have any games at this current time. Now, there was a new update to the workers section that's going to be coming out, and that's actually underneath this add event worker section. If we go ahead and we add an event worker and we click go, what we're going to do is you'll see here coming out in a couple of days where this employee is actually going away, and you'll need to choose whether they're actually an employee or a W-2 employee. So that means, let's say your science teacher or the gym teacher collects tickets for you. You can't pay them through Arbiter Pay because they're a W-2 employee, but you could also choose that they're not, if they're not an employee of you, you would choose that they're not an employee, and then they would be a 1099 employee. By doing that, that's going to allow you to control your different workers, as well as they're going to get invites and different things like that to make sure that they're going to be there for all the information. So everything's good to go. We have that out. We've got Bradley in here. We click save. We've created our teams. Let's go to kind of our next setup here. So we've created our teams. Now let's create our opponents. So in our opponents tab, we're going to go ahead and click right here. It's going to add some opponents, but let's say we didn't have any in here. Now, obviously, we can always go through and we can actually take action and email these people. But let's add an opponent. Now, generally, this is actually going to be based on your zip code, and you can adjust this however you want. So we'll go out to a different zip code here. We're going to click on Find Opponents, and it'll actually pull up all the different opponents that you could potentially be a part of. If you want to go ahead and assign yourself to one of them, you go ahead and just click on the little checkbox here and say, I'm done subscribing to opponents. If you can't find your opponents, there is a section over here that allows you to click here, and it's going to say that you need to email us to add your opponent in here, just because we try to keep this list as clean as possible so that we don't have, for example, this South Ogden J.R. High. We don't want somebody to come in and say South Ogden Junior High, and then it be two different opponents when it's really just one person. So we've chosen West Point Junior High, and we've clicked I'm done subscribing. You can see that it added an opponent. We can come down to our West Point Junior High, and we have an opponent. This helps us set it up so that we have if we create any away games, or as we look at this, you can see if I were to go into, for example, any type of these, so wrestling, boys varsity, you could see who they're playing, so where they need to go, different things like that. So we have, first of all, adding teams, adding opponents. Now we can go in and we can add a game once we have that information in. So let's add a game. Some of you are probably familiar with this, but we click up here. This gives us an opportunity to go right ahead and actually add different things. So you can add practices in here, which is great, like I said, for Arbiter Live, which allows parents, students to be able to know when practice is so they don't miss it. You can also import games. Now, the one thing, we will have a webinar about importing games in Arbiter Game, but a little side note is when you download this template, it's going to put it in an Excel sheet, and it's very specific to your school. So don't adjust it. You want to keep it exactly how it is, and make sure you use the drop-down box where possible to make sure your import goes in successfully. So underneath our schedule, we're going to create a game. And here we are. Now you can decide whether you want to name the game. It's optional in our particular case. But this way we're going to choose our figure skating. So let's choose our figure skating girls varsity. We can choose our opponent, which we put in there as West Point Junior High. Now you can see that because we chose figure skating girls varsity, you can see Alta High School was automatically selected. You can see the auxiliary gym was already selected. You'll also see the start time was selected, the duration was selected, and all we have to do is go in and check the date. So let's go ahead and we're going to check just yesterday, because we're going to show you a little bit about what it looks like. In fact, let's put it actually in the future. You can leave this published game. That means it's going to Arbiter Live. You can see that it's league game, or you can change that if you'd like to. Now, because it's a home team, the facilities request automatically pulls up. Now, this basically shows, remember we said 5 o'clock in the morning to clean up at 8 p.m. at night. In this section, we can choose that we've communicated this facilities coordinator and that it has been approved, or we can leave that blank for right now so we can make sure. Because it's a home game, we don't need to have any type of transportation. But if you needed it, let's say that our ice rink was down the road, we could also choose to have the facilities or have the transportation office communicated. We also will talk a little bit later called something called School Dude, which is a group that we partner with that can actually help you make your transportation and facilities requests seamless. And it really lets you kind of, instead of this communication being something you have to do, something is automatically done and approved on their side. So if you have any questions about School Dude, please give us a call. We can kind of talk to you a little bit about what School Dude is, but we will have a webinar a little bit later. You've said that this is assigned by school, that we need 4 judges, and then we can choose if West High School needs to pay us money to participate. So let's say that, yes, they're going to pay us $60 to participate. You're going to see the breach fee automatically pops to $60. You can change that. So in other words, if you want to come do the figure skating, it's going to be $60. If you accept the contract but then don't come, you'll still owe us $20. Once we do that, we can choose who's going to pay it. We're going to click Create Game. And then we can go here out to the 12th to see our game. Here's our girls varsity figure skating. So if we see our girls varsity figure skating, we'll talk a little bit about scheduling a little bit later, but you'll see that red means there's something you need to do, yellow means that we're waiting on somebody to do something, and then green means it's good to go. So I'll show you a little bit about what that means. Red means I need to accept the contract. You'll see we accept the contract. And it went yellow. Yellow means there's something more that needs to be done. You can see that West Point Junior High needs to accept the contract. They've also given us the ability to accept it for them. We encourage West Point Junior High to do it for themselves, but for this case, we're going to go ahead and accept it. Or in a case that they don't use Arbiter Game, we would go in and accept it as well. You can see now it's gone green. It's good to go. Just like a stoplight, keep it moving. Now, if you needed to edit the game, just like I did there, you're going to be able to actually click on the game itself, and there's a way to edit this information. And we'll talk a little bit about that later in a different webinar. So add event workers, we showed you a little bit about how to do that over here in the add event workers spot. There's also a way that per game, if maybe you forgot to add an event worker, it's this little button over here. You'll actually click here. You can click add event workers. You can say that David Martin needs to go ahead and I'm going to pay him $20 to be, and there's a lot of different things that you can do. So maybe there's a concession stand, and we go ahead and I assign him to that. There we go. So now you can see we paid $20 for David to be a concession worker. We did show you on Teams on how to actually add event workers within the teams, so that if I were to do that within the teams, this event worker thing would automatically be filled out and we would be able to have it automatically assigned, so you don't have to do that. But there is two different ways that you can do that, and you can also see that the event workers turn green, meaning that you've completed it. You could add more if you wanted to, you can unassign it, but now David Martin's gonna get an email saying, hey, you've been added as a concession worker for this date. And then you can communicate back and forth with that information. So we've talked kind of steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So there isn't more that I'm going to talk about today. Once again, this is kind of be a basic setup for us. If you have any questions or concerns, we're going to kind of turn the time over to you. Once again, there's that question box over to the right-hand side. You can ask questions if you'd like to. I'll be more than happy to show you some things outside of what we talked about if there's something burning in there. We also have, once again, arbitersports.force.com/schools. That'll give you all this information plus more. And you can always give us a call at 800-311-4060 or just email us at success@arbitersports.com.